Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, in this video, I would like to talk about Meghan Markle. Okay, I think this is a very fascinating case. And before I even start the video, I'm just gonna get to the punchline. And I'm sorry if I disappoint anybody. I don't see any mental illness with Meghan Markle. Okay, this is very similar to the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Um, this is an interesting case, and so it is interesting, and it deserves to be looked at because we can learn a lot from this. But I think in the end, a lot of times when we look at celebrities, with some exceptions, but a lot of times when we're looking at celebrities, I think the biggest lessons from these cases are more about us than about them. And yes, we can learn about them, but as we learn about them, we can learn about ourselves. And I think part of the story is how, in the hysteria of looking at people that are kind of high profile, and with the hysteria that comes with how we feel about these people, I think we get into, as the public, I think we get into kind of exaggerations in the way we perceive these people, and in the way we assess their actual character. Okay, so I think this case can be seen in kind of the same framework as the way that I look at the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Okay, because in the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp analysis, I don't see mental illness, but I do see major cluster B issues that are coming more out of immaturity and kind of a type of spoiledness that we see, I think, in a lot of people that are kind of in show business or sort of in celebrity. And of course, not all. A lot of people in show business are very mature, probably more mature than a lot of average people. But some people in the celebrity world um, really do have serious issues around immaturity and spoiledness. Okay, so that can often present sort of like cluster B issues, and it can present cluster B behaviors. But I think we need to look at this as spectrum behavior. Okay, this is spectrum issues. Okay, and the same goes for Prince Harry. I mean, I think you don't even have to really reflect on it. You can just see, just from the way he talks and the way he presents himself. He's actually a nice person, I think, but I think he's immature, and I think he probably wouldn't even deny that, to be quite honest. You know, and so I'm going to be looking at this from the point of view of cluster B perspective and cluster B issues, cluster B spectrum, but really looking at it more from the lens of immaturity. Okay, and believe me, without being mentally ill, if you're just immature, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. Okay, without having any mental illness, and a person who's sufficiently immature is not dealing with it can have a lot of major problems, including getting into crime or even the worst crimes. So um, to say something is it has to do with immaturity is not to minimize it at all. And I think a lot of psychologists out there, especially like say when we look at like the case of Lady Diana, Diana Spencer. I think there was a big temptation to wonder whether she had borderline personality disorder. But I think it's kind of irresponsible to make that, even if you see the signs, even if you see the apparent symptoms, I think it's irresponsible to arrive at that conclusion, that assessment, if you don't first rule out maturity issues. Okay. And I think Diana probably had some maturity issues. I mean, she was kind of young when she ended up married to Prince Charles. And, she didn't have the chance to have that normal college experience where she could take her adulthood to the next level and really kind of get in the grind of, being just kind of more professionally minded and stuff. And so I think she probably didn't have the chance to even demonstrate what she was capable of under more normal circumstances, you know. And I think in a way, I think looking back on it, I hope the royal family can see it's almost a form of child abuse, or a form of abusing a young person, to take somebody who's like say 18 years old and to get them straight into a marriage at such a high senior level of the royal family without letting them go to college first. I think that almost is to me kind of abusive, because you're really taking away an opportunity to get that last stage of growing up. That can really help a person, just kind of just get, even if they don't go to college, at least have a few years just to get into a profession, or to learn how to work and stuff. So I'm sure that Diana had issues emotionally, and she probably had an emotional, let's say her emotional personality type was probably congruent with borderline personality disorder, because she was kind of emotional and she had, certain characteristics. But I just don't think it's fair to diagnose her because I think there's still on the table some major issues that have to do with her own development as an older adult. And let's not discount the fact that, between the ages of 19 and let's say 25, an adult has a lot of development they can still be accomplishing, through college or through the military or whatever. And so I just don't think she had the opportunity to show who she really could have been. And also just the tremendous stress of having such a personal failure with her relationship with Prince Charles. I mean, that was just so spectacular, so high charged, that I just think there's just too many fireworks in the picture and too many issues around her maturity to really make it reasonable to really even guess whether she had a mental illness. So even that even applies to Lady Diana. And I only say that because, she did show a lot of really signs of like over emotionality, kind of weird, kind of almost the signs of that would make you wonder if there was BPD in the picture. But I'm here to say, at least in my opinion, there's just too many other issues that could be more mundane explanations that are still on the table to be ruled out, that just don't allow, I don't think, a fair conclusion that she really had, really an organic mental illness. I just I don't see that. And so when I'm looking at, like, say, Prince Harry, and when I see his immaturity, I'm not going to start thinking, oh, well, his mother had BPD, so maybe, I'm not going to go down that road. I think um, as far as I'm concerned, Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, Diana, all these people, they could have been much different in presentation if they all had an opportunity to mature in a more comprehensive manner. Okay, and they weren't, let's say, so spoiled. Okay, but let's focus on Meghan Markle. Okay, so um, going back to, like, say, what we can tell just from watching the documentaries and stuff, I'm sorry, but what I see is a young girl who maybe has kind of a funny family. I mean, she has to deal with being mixed race, and I'll start by saying that I'm mixed race, so I can understand that can be very challenging, and there's no need to minimize that. But I don't see her really. She doesn't really appear to be too traumatized growing up. She probably was somewhat, it's not easy to be, let's say, to have a strange family where one parent is one race, and also, like, where I guess the parents were already split up by the time she was, like, in adolescence. So, I can imagine her middle school and high school years being kind of difficult, but from what I can tell, she did very well in school, and she was kind of a leader and really kind of an overachiever, and ended up going to a not an Ivy League school, but she went to a pretty high level private school, Northwestern University in Chicago. So, like, that's pretty good. I think for a lot of people, just the idea of just even the idea of even getting into Northwest University, I mean, that's a lot of people try very hard and don't get into schools like that. And so it doesn't mean she's super, super smart, but it means she really had her, she really was a solid person, and was able to graduate from Northwest University. So, I mean, I'm sorry, but those are not really indicators to me right off the bat. Yes, there are people with BPD and NPD who have PhDs and whatever, but I think, in general terms, what I'm seeing is someone who's pretty well adapted, pretty, I would say, yeah, just pretty well adjusted. Well adjusted. Now, where do we start to see problems with Meghan Markle? Okay, because, yeah, you can get into Northwest University, you can be a good student, but you can still be maybe petty and immature in other areas. Okay, so I think that where she learned to be a good operator in life. Okay, she learned how to operate, to get good grades, and just to be a successful operator. I think we have to admit that maybe interpersonally was probably where maybe she wasn't as strong. Okay, so there are people in this world who are very good operators, but they're not so interpersonally sophisticated. Okay, and I think probably because she had that broken home where her parents were in different places, where maybe, who knows, maybe she had to kind of take care of herself a little bit. And maybe her parents had their own issues, that she just didn't develop maybe as much in the interpersonal as she did, let's say, in just operating, getting good grades, and just being successful, in other ways. Like, so, from what I can understand, like, say, when she got into show business, a lot of people in show business said that she was kind of hard to get close to, and so she may have either kind of a deficit in just being able to kind of relate to people, sort of, like, say, relate to people organically, and maybe she's kind of mechanical in the way she relates to people, and also maybe she's just kind of very reserved about really exposing her intimacy to people, you know. So she may be kind of hard to penetrate because that just may be how she's adapted to her life experience. But that is not the same as having cluster B disorder. Okay, that's not the same thing. A lot of people develop those shields and those layers because that's just the way they've grown up, and that is just having a personality. That's not pathology necessarily. So so yeah, I mean, I can understand that she is not so organic interpersonally, and she's probably has a lot of shield, a lot of layers, to sort of protect her most intimate reality, you know. But I mean, it can be a problem if you don't know how to manage it. But that's not mental illness. That's just dealing with your own personality. That's just life. And some people do well in life, and some people don't without having a mental problem. It's hard to have a personality. It's hard to deal with it. But where I start to see problems, like real problems with Meghan Markle, is despite all her success and despite basically her being not a crazy person, I do see something that's not mental illness, but I think it's a marker of immaturity that's so important that I think it is gonna could cause a lot of problems in her life and could explain a lot what's going on. So actually, I see two things. Okay, just two things with Meghan Markle. The first thing I see is she has, I think, almost like a striking level of immaturity in terms of appreciating. She has difficulty appreciating, um, sort of like, say, the sophistication of what it means to be a good actor. Okay, and how serious of a profession that actually is. So I think there's something in her head where she somehow feels like being an actor is kind of like a frivolous kind of a profession. Like she has it in her mind that you have to be like a real professional, or something more serious to be a more serious person. And I think that right there shows that she's almost falling into, like, say, the image and the surface of Hollywood and show business. Just because it's show business doesn't mean that you don't have to be very serious and very talented to, let's say, be a good agent or a good actor, or work in that area. And I think in a few interviews she kind of dismissed the acting thing, like, yeah, acting wasn't that big of a deal. It's not that serious of a profession, and kind of almost minimizing what it means to be an actor. And I think that to me is a sign that she's a little bit superficial in how she understands things. Okay, because just because it's show business and it's entertainment, that does, in no way did that mean it's not serious. It's kind of the same thing. Well, let's say if I have somebody in my family who knows an NFL football player, and I'll say, oh, but he's just an NFL football player. It's like, okay, yeah, I know it's entertainment. I know it's just sports. But the bottom line is, to be an NFL football player, you got to be extraordinary, extraordinary. I mean, you have to have an excellent personality, and you have to have, really a tremendous skill. I mean, tremendous skill. And football is also a mental game. You have to really be really, really exceptional. So I think when someone starts assessing, like, say, like a career or a job, just based on the fact that it's, like, say it's in the entertainment business, or let's say somebody is like a card dealer in a casino. It's like, he's just a card dealer in a casino. Well, it's kind of like you're looking at it only in terms of, like, say, the status of it, as opposed to looking at mechanically what really is involved in that job. And being a card dealer actually requires some talent, and it does require quite a bit of skill and attention. So I think that right there tells me that Megan, it's already gotten into the way she processes reality, and she actually has distorted cognitive assessments because of her immaturity in appreciating, the full reality of things, because she's so caught up in the status of things. Okay, so that is actually a narcissistic process. Okay, but like I said before, if you can rule out, if you as okay, before you actually diagnose somebody with, like, say, a mental illness, you always want to see if there's another explanation that's not so clinical. So, like, in the case of Meghan Markle, I think you have a lot of issues with her maturity on the table. How mature is she as a person? So if those narcissistic issues can be explained by her maturity, then in that case I'd reserve on a diagnosis. You know what I mean? Because if she were to find a way to get more mature or deal with her maturity issues, that wouldn't really be, it's not quite as, how would I say, I'm just going to put it like this. I think whenever you can explain a symptom in terms of maturity, I think you ought to reserve on the mental health diagnosis. That's just my opinion. Um, because maybe in some ways, maybe people overdiagnose. Maybe a lot of people who are just immature are being diagnosed with BPD or almost BPD when really it's just maturity stuff. I think mental health should get better at kind of distinguishing, when something is just a behavior problem or really a mental illness. But in any case, I mean, there is a narcissistic process going on um, where Meghan Markle is so kind of caught up in the status of different jobs that she's not looking down into the reality of how serious those jobs really are, and she's not appreciating maybe how much of a legitimate profession it is to be an actor, and how much talent and how much skill is actually required to be a good actor. So, and that's after her actually being in the business. So that's kind of surprising to me. But it does show that she has narcissistic processes. But again, I'm not going to go to the mental illness or the diagnosis, because I think that there's still on the table the major issue: does she have maturity issues? And I think my feeling is that Meghan Markle is more of a case of immaturity as opposed to mental illness. Okay. And then there's a second issue I see, which is kind of also a narcissistic issue. It's more of a fantasy kind of an issue where, like, a lot of people, and it's not just narcissists, it's just people in general. I think there's a tendency to think that it's not necessary in life to just live in the grind. Okay. This is the issue of the grind. Most people, they say they live lives of quiet despair, just grinding and grinding, and that there's a certain percentage of us that kind of want to believe that it's not necessary to live in the grind. Okay, that the grind is kind of optional, and it's probably better at some point if we can stop grinding. You know, and I guess I get the feeling somehow from the things that she said that she kind of almost believes that it would be better. It would sort of be like not necessary for her to have to live in the grind, and I think she kind of almost would prefer to live in a life that doesn't have the grind. Okay, or she kind of thinks that there are ways of living where the grind is sort of optional. Okay, now the way I look at that's an interesting way to think, and it's very common. So because it's so common, I don't think that's clinical. That's not on the road to a diagnosis. That's just something that a lot of people deal with. But I think outside of clinical psychology, just in the world, there is that sort of temptation for all of us to sort of not necessarily want to be committed to a life in the grind. The idea that to grind out your life is kind of like almost like a tragedy, or not a life well lived. And I guess I'd like to challenge that. I think a lot of people discover that even if you are a royal family member, even if you are, let's say, an actor, some people discover that even in these privileged, very, very high level positions, that some people find that they do live in the grind, okay, and that it's necessary to maintain their lives. And so I think it's kind of the fantasy of what it means to be, like, say, up in the high class, or like, say, in the royal family, or in celebrity level. It's almost like a fantasy to think that there's no grind at that level. Okay. But I think in reality, when people are really dealing with all their adult stuff, and we're dealing with just what it means to be just metabolizing the situations of life, I think all of life is a grind, but in a good way. You know what I mean? And I don't think that has to be seen as tragic. I think that's actually healthy. That constantly in life we're being presented with dilemmas, with conflicts, also tedious things that need to be done. Even if you're in the royal family, you got to tediously deal with schedules, maybe multiple assistants and employees, and just dealing with agendas and maybe speeches. And it's a full-time job. And I think for a lot of people that's like a shock, because it's like, hey, I'm supposed to be a high class person. I'm supposed to be in the royal family. It's like, this is a grind. Everything in life is a grind. Where in life do you get to the point where there's no grind? Even if you're like a rich person and you just have a mansion and you're just living on a trust fund in Los Angeles, what about the people that have to come and clean your pool? What about the people that have to clean your house? What about insurance policies for all your sports cars? What if you have a son who gets in an accident and has to go to the hospital? What about your children? And no matter how rich you are, you're dealing with health insurance. You're dealing with just the tedious frustrations of just living a life. So any life can become a full-time job, and it probably should be, you know. And so I think what I'm seeing in Megan is, I think she doesn't say it outright, but I think she, from what I gather, and this is just my impression, I kind of get the idea that when she got into the royal family with Harry, I think she had the idea that she was just going up into a life where there would be no grind. And I think it actually kind of shocked her, to find that there was a grind in that place. You know, you had to grind it out. You had to deal with people. You had to deal with frustrating things. And it was like, wow, this is like a job. And I think that was part of the reason why she was interested in getting away from acting, because I think she maybe even saw acting as kind of tedious, you know. So right there, I'm seeing some patterns with Megan where she's sort of like aspiring to not deal with the frustration of life, you know, and maybe the dissonances of life. So that is kind of close to narcissism, you know, because I think narcissistic people are fundamentally uncomfortable and irritable with dissonance and tedium and frustration. I think that that is there. But because in her case, I think immaturity is on the table, you know, as something to rule out. I don't think we can go to mental illness, but I think it's just this huge pile of questions about whether she has maturity issues as opposed to mental illness. So because in my opinion, I'm seeing more of a case of maturity. She is presenting cluster B. She's presenting narcissistic features. Okay, but I think these features to me are really matters of maturity. Okay, but definitely the two things I see is that she sort of doesn't accept, you know, or even understand how the grind is actually a good part of life. She's kind of like shocked. I think she was shocked to see a grind and having to deal with being in the royal family. I think it was too much of a shock for her, and she didn't adapt to it. Okay, but I also think that she has kind of an immature way of viewing things based purely kind of more heavily on status as opposed to like the reality. So she sort of underappreciates a lot of things in the real world because she's seeing things too much through the lens of status. So again, these are very narcissistic features, but I'm looking at it more as a case of immaturity, not so much mental illness. Okay, but then let's see. And then there's a third thing that I see with her, and maybe it's kind of a product of these two things I just talked about. When you see things too much on the surface, you're going to have a chronic lack of appreciation. Okay, a lack of appreciation, and I think that that lack of appreciation she has shows up how she deals with her family. Okay, her own blood family. Okay, it's like you see over and over again, it really is kind of lacking in her a deeper appreciation for things, including her own family. Okay, like her dad and all that. And this is where I'm going to get into my analysis of her. Okay, in terms of not clinical, but just her as a person. Okay, and also a lesson to all of us. You know, immaturity is something that can destroy your life. Okay, so you don't have to be mentally ill. Just being immature that can destroy your life. Okay, so she gets into the royal family. Okay, she's on track to get married. I don't know who set the pace of the marriage, of the wedding. I don't know if she wanted to accelerate getting married so fast, or maybe because it looks bad to just be a girlfriend in the royal family, you kind of want to get married quick. So I'm going to assume that the royal family was sort of putting more pressure on accelerating the wedding as opposed to her. Okay, I'm sure she wanted to get married, but I think she probably wouldn't be so urgent to make it so quick. Okay, but I think being in the royal family, it would just look bad to have a girlfriend and not get married. I guess it's just the way the royal family is. So right there, I'm going to see the first big problem. Okay, Meghan Markle comes with some immaturity, clear immaturity, but she's dealing with a situation where she's in a family that's way more powerful than she is. Okay, so now we're dealing with an imbalance of power. Um, it's bad enough that Prince Harry is a royal person. Okay, and so she already has an imbalance of power just against Prince Harry, but Prince Harry comes with this massive institution. Okay, so he's like a super, like it's like an institution. So she's not marrying a person, she's marrying a mega institution. So Meghan Markle basically has no power. Okay, and she's basically overpowered. She doesn't have control over probably exactly how fast it is before she actually has her wedding. Okay, so that already put kind of an acceleration on things. And when you look at her family, okay, honest to God, if you want to see somebody who's diagnosable, That sister that she has that's always on the internet, I think she is probably diagnosable or closer to being diagnosable than Meghan is. Okay, I'm not going to say what I think she has, but I think she's probably also not truly mentally ill, but I think she's closer to it than Meghan just by the way she comes across. But basically, Meghan, I think, was probably embarrassed about her family. Okay, because her family is a little bit goofball, and let's say it wouldn't be a trouble to, like, say if you were marrying someone in the United States, like say a doctor or whatever. um, it's okay to have a goofball family, because it's not that big of a deal. But the idea is that she would be trying to introduce her goofball father and her sister and all these people to like the royal family. That was probably just intimidating for her, and she probably didn't know how to reconcile that. She probably needed more time. So I'm going to assume that she didn't plan to have her wedding so quickly. Okay, but she's basically in a situation where she doesn't have a lot of time to try to get these goofball people acquainted with like the most powerful people in Great Britain, or even in the world. And so I think that would probably be unrealistic for anybody to try to work that out. And you could say, well, Meghan, you should have been more diplomatic, to work out some way where your father could have been invited and got to know these people. But I think she knew better than anybody that her family's kind of flaky, you know. And I'm not putting down her family. I mean, this is over everybody's head. Her family is fine. I'm just saying they're a little flaky. They're kind of goofballish, regular middle class people might enjoy hanging out with them, but they probably wouldn't fit in, in the upper levels of royal society, So I can understand how Meghan just didn't have the creativity to figure out how to make that work. And then I think Prince Harry is to blame, okay, really for the eventual dominoes that destroyed Meghan's relationship with her father. Okay, because I think Harry has this fixation, this exaggerated fixation about how bad the press is, how bad the paparazzi are. Okay, and then when Meghan's father, made that mistake of paying, receiving money, I think, or something where he sold a story in Mexico, where he's putting on his tuxedo and he sold information to a reporter. I think Harry took that as a betrayal. And I think Meghan sort of had to take sides, okay? And she got into that weird narcissistic polarization where she just had to put her father down and sort of, make him the bad guy. And again, it's a narcissistic procedure, but I think this all comes out of immaturity. But basically, because Harry's hung up and has trauma around, the press and reporters being, kind of getting into your family. I think that really that was really like a thorn in Harry's side, and I think he kind of poisoned Meghan to just have this nasty attitude towards her dad. Because yeah, her dad did something stupid, okay, but like I guess in another situation, maybe Meghan could have been more flexible about it. But it was just like once that domino went down, it all went down from there. And basically Meghan just got committed to her side, and she maybe just too proud to find flexibility there, and her husband's not going to help her find flexibility there. So I think really Harry played a part in the destruction of Meghan's family. Because Harry has his own issue with the press. He's probably so resentful of the way the press probably helped his mother to die. Basically the paparazzi, and also how one of those reporters from the BBC manipulated Diana to give a terrible interview, and Harry probably just won't forgive the press for what they've done. And so he carries that super resentment. And when Meghan's dad made the mistake of getting involved with the press, that was probably just triggered something in Harry, and I think it just chain reaction, just like through like telepathy. I think Meghan picked it up and sort of like was almost like possessed by that. And so she's taken on this kind of thing of her dad sort of committed this unforgivable betrayal, and now the families are against each other, and it's just almost like a comic disaster. But and then as far as like Meghan not being able to handle actually being in the royal family, again, I think she just had an unrealistic expectation and didn't realize what a tedious, frustrating, interpersonal grind it would be to be in the royal family, and it would be involve a lot of conflict, a lot of friction, a lot of dealing with people. And she probably just wasn't even close to being prepared, to live a life of that much grinding. And so they ended up just being just a couple of cowards, and then just left the country. And now they're just kind of running away from things, and so they're sort of, the momentum is behind them, it's like, I should say they're behind the power curve, and so they can never really look good because what they did was sort of a giving up, and showing basically the theme of this video, which is just a lack of maturity, so that's my summary of Meghan Markle, just basically immature. So thanks for watching.